Xi Jinping reportedly calling President-elect Donald Trump to congratulate him.
Trump naming more China hawks to his cabinet.
He said that he intends to impose tariffs on products imported from China by as much as 60%.
At a pivotal moment, correspondent Martin Smith examines the rise of the Chinese leader. His life.
Xi Jinping learned as a teenager that if you want to survive, you have to master the tools of the Maoist toolkit. You have to be redder than anybody else.
His rule.
Xi was not afraid to say, no, we're not giving you the freedoms and rights you deserve.
And relations with the United States.
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country.
Will Donald Trump, who preaches America first, go to war to defend Taiwan?
You know, I'm not sure.
Now on Frontline, China, the U.S., and the rise of Xi Jinping.
This program contains graphic content which may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
In July of 2021, China marked the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party.
中国共产党一经诞生，就把为中国人民谋幸福、为中华民族谋复兴确立为自己的。
In his speech, President Xi Jinping celebrated China's emergence as one of the wealthiest countries on earth.
这是中华民族的伟大光荣，这是中国人民的伟大光荣。
By all accounts, Xi is the most powerful Chinese leader since the founder of the People's Republic, Mao Zedong. And like Mao, he has immense ambitions for his country. In his first decade in power, Xi launched the largest infrastructure project in history, building ports, roads, and a massive digital network linking China to around 150 countries. He has made China the world's #1 producer of electric vehicles. He has invested heavily in a race with the U.S. to dominate the development of artificial intelligence. He has plans to dethrone the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And Xi has presided over an increasingly antagonistic relationship with the U.S.
中国人民也绝不允许任何外来势力欺负、压迫、奴役我们。谁妄想这样干，必将在14多亿中国人民用血肉铸成的钢铁长城面前碰得头破血流。
Xi Jinping is different. He does not want to be part of the world as it is. What he wants is to be much more dominant in the way the world is run. He doesn't want.
Orville Schell is widely recognized as the dean of China experts in the U.S. and has served as a consultant on this project. He has made many trips to China and has closely observed the rise of Xi Jinping.
You can read his speeches, and it's all there. He says what he's going to do, and he does it.
台独是历史逆流，是绝路。我们不承诺放弃使用武力。
And we can't quite believe it's anything but propaganda, which is just maybe nonsense, but it isn't. He's laid it all out there.
提高军事训练实战化水平，牢牢掌握能打仗、打胜仗的过硬本领。
Xi Jinping speaks all the time about hostile foreign forces, 敌对势力. That is the core of his sense of the U.S. and China relationship. It's hostile.
We set out to understand the roots of this hostility, to understand Xi himself and the China he is leading. But China has heavily restricted international media, and we were not allowed to report from inside the country. No current official would speak to us on the record.
China's not allowing us to come into China. Why?
China's handling all kinds of challenges in the world. You may or may not be on their radar screen.
Victor Gao is a well-known figure who travels the world speaking in defense of Xi's China. We interviewed him in New York.
What is it about Xi Jinping's presidency that has fomented this hostility between the U.S. and China?
I disagree with the way you characterize the situation.
But after 2012, when he comes into power?
I would say fundamentally, China and the United States need to deal with each other as equals, but China-U.S. relations are moving in a direction which is proving to be difficult and dangerous.
To begin, I wanted to know where Xi Jinping came from and how his past shaped him into the man he is today. He grew up during a tortured time in Chinese history, but he was a child of privilege with red roots. Xi's father had fought alongside Mao Zedong, and after the revolution, had risen to become a high-ranking Communist Party official. Young Xi lived in a comfortable home and was able to attend the best schools.
He was one of the so-called princelings, and there was a lot of privilege that he enjoyed. So Xi Jinping would have grown up in a...
Joseph Tarigian is an author and professor at American University.
He went to a school that was primarily attended by the offspring of high-ranking cadres, and they were told that they were going to be the ones who were going to bring China to modernity, who were going to draw upon the legacies of the Chinese Communist Party to transform society.
Prior to the 1949 revolution, China was ruled by a U.S.-backed dictator, Chiang Kai-shek.
Well known to every American is lean, keen Chiang Kai-shek, undisputed leader and idol of millions of Chinese.
Mao called Chiang a running dog of imperialism. He fought to depose Chiang for 22 years.
Despite aid from America, Chiang's forces were beaten back. The revolution was now within Mao's grasp, and it was the start of the biggest political and economic experiment the world has ever seen.
Before Mao's victory, China was among the world's poorest nations. Inspired by communist theory, Mao blamed China's wealthy elites for the nation's ills. Mao embraced communist propaganda like this film to rally the people against landowners. Dunce caps, a regular feature of Mao's China, were used to publicly humiliate landowners, intellectuals, and disloyal politicians. In 1962, when Xi Jinping was just 9 years old, his father became an unlikely victim of these purges. Mao accused him of being disloyal. Xi's father was subjected to so-called struggle sessions, where he was beaten and denounced.
His father was framed by a trump-up charge that he supported a novel that might have cast doubt on Mao's leadership, and that's simple.
Professor Alfred Chan is author of an exhaustive biography of Xi Jinping that chronicles his life.
I've seen his father was dragged out and parade in the street. In those days, they put a dunce cap on him. He was subjected to mock trials. Those were essentially kangaroo courts.
Here, a sign hangs around the neck of Xi's father that reads, "Anti-Party Element, Xi Zhongshun."
We know that this was an emotionally traumatizing experience for him, When you're a member of the Chinese Communist Party, everything is the party. Your entire life is the party. So for the party to tell you that you oppose Mao, it's hard to overestimate just how galling it is for a member of this kind of organization to hear that.
Xi's father was sent to work in a factory and was later incarcerated for 8 years. Meanwhile, some of the party elite were having doubts about Mao's leadership. A famine, the result of Mao's failed farm policies, had devastated the country.
These people have come with reports of people dying in the fields and starving peasants eating some of the seed for next year's planting.
Undeterred, Mao launched his so-called Cultural Revolution in 1966, expanding the categories of those who would be purged.
So during the Cultural Revolution, there was something known as the Heilei, the black categories. And these were the people who had no standing as human beings. They had no rights. They were considered unacceptable, or I guess you'd have to say evil. They had to be overturned and even possibly, in all too many cases, exterminated. And we saw millions killed. They were not fully human.
Marauding bands of youth, known as Red Guards, were encouraged by Mao to help root out the so-called black elements for punishment. Tai Sha, a long-time party member, came of age in the midst of the Cultural Revolution.
You say he was the savior. What did he save you from?
当时我们的理解就是毛泽东带领中国人民推翻了这个就是我们讲的那个帝国主义，资本家、地主对中国人民的压迫，让中国人站起来当了国家的主人。
One of the most pernicious and harmful aspects of the whole Maoist revolution was that it distorted and made it impossible for people to be human and to have family loyalties, friendship loyalties, to keep any moral compass on whatsoever.
As a 13-year-old boy, Xi himself was subjected to struggle sessions. He was forced to wear a dunce cap and was publicly denounced by his own mother.
According to Xi Jinping, he suffered quite a few of those struggle sessions. And his half-sister, she couldn't take it and she committed suicide. The psychological and physical abuse was tremendous.
At 15, Xi Jinping was sent to the countryside to do manual labor, a so-called sent-down youth.
At that time, 17 million young people were sent to the countryside to be re-educated by the poor peasants. Mao thought that's the reality of China, the poor and underdeveloped countryside. Xi Jinping went to one of the poorest part of China, and he stayed there for 7 years, and essentially worked as a peasant. Work was really strenuous, so Xi Jinping, being a city kid, a princely, was never used to the farmers' work style like beasts of burden.
At first, it was something he couldn't handle. He talked about the hard labor, he talked about living in a cave, he talked about how difficult it was to get along with the peasants.
Xi Jinping did, at one point, just leave and try to go home, and his family refused to accept him. So, I mean, it's difficult to know what the consequences of something like that are, but we do know fundamentally that all human beings have close connections to parents. And when those close connections go awry, they have consequences.
I managed to visit this area where Xi served out the Cultural Revolution, a village in Shanxi province. So I think I got a somewhat unvarnished look at what life was like there. And
until 2016, Edward Wong was the New York Times Beijing bureau chief.
And this area of China is one of the poorest areas of China. Back then, people lived in these cave homes. And Xi lived in a cave home in the back of the house of this elderly man whom I met, Mr. Liu. Mr. Liu told me Xi had books with him and his light would be on late at night, sometimes reading.
Xi's time in exile has become part of his creation myth. A cave where he lived during his 7 years here is now a tourist attraction. It's filled with books on Marxist philosophy and political theory, which Xi says he read in the evenings while struggling to survive, shaping him into the leader he would become.
插队本身这是一个标志的一个界定的一个阶段。我总感觉呢，这个到了插队以后，是获得了一个升华和进化。个人呢是一种，确实是一种脱胎换骨的感觉。
Jianying Jia and her family also barely survived Mao. She now lives in New York, the author of 8 books on China, and a contributor to The New Yorker.
I was born into this so-called New China, and I was fed this diet of we're living in a strong and happy country, and we're going to grow up and, not only build a better China, but at some point, we're going to liberate mankind, including the Americans. This was my mother, was myself, and I was 6, and I remember clearly this night where our house was ransacked by these Red Guards. They came at night and our house was turned upside down. My parents were humiliated. You go from the flowers of motherland Mao's children to suddenly we're black elements.
How many people died as a result of the Cultural Revolution?
There's different estimates of that. Officially, one of the party elders said several millions people died. But, the figures are far from being accurate because the government, whoever was the dominant regime, had always a tendency to cover up.
Between the 1950s and the mid-1970s, China suffered an estimated 25 to 45 million deaths from the famine and from the eradication of black elements.
This is our Holocaust. And to this day, the world has not really come to realize that's really what happened. And the same party responsible for it are still in power, and Mao is still an icon.
Today, Xi Jinping lives and works beside this familiar portrait of Mao, overlooking Tiananmen Square in Beijing. Xi has embraced Mao.
It's a mystery why these people don't hate Mao. Why don't they reflect why the Cultural Revolution happened, why they went...
Li Yuan, who grew up in China, now writes a column for the New York Times.
Suffering. Xi Jinping himself talked a lot about his suffering when he was a young kid.
He says it was good for him.
Yes, and now he's telling the Chinese young people, you should learn to eat bitterness. It will be good for you.
Xi Jinping learned as a teenager that if you want to survive, you have to master the tools of the Maoist toolkit. You have to be redder than anybody else. His education was one of surviving in a highly politicized environment of the Cultural Revolution when his father was one of the antichrists, and Xi had to find his way. And to do that, he had to become more politically correct than anybody else. Fundamentally, Xi Jinping drank the Kool-Aid of the Cultural Revolution. And those formative years really did cast the die.
At age 22, Xi Jinping returned from the countryside. He had missed years of schooling, but he would manage to gain entrance to one of China's most elite universities.
Yeah, he was lucky to be accepted into the Tsinghua University. It's China's MIT.
Well, this is a kid who has no secondary education, and he's able to get admitted to the most prestigious university in China.
Yes, very unusual. Mao destroyed the educational system, but then in the early 1970s, Mao decided the educational system had to be reformed, not favoring the elite, but welcome peasants and workers and soldiers as well. And that's how Xi Jinping got admitted.
Xi got a degree in chemical engineering, but his interest was in party politics. In 1979, after graduation, he was posted as a junior aide to a senior Communist Party official. But after 3 years in Beijing, Xi decamped to the provinces to pursue his own political career and would rise through the ranks of local government. It was a time of great reform. Mao had died in 1976, and China was now under a new leader, Deng Xiaoping. Twice purged himself, Deng had seen the horrors of the Cultural Revolution. He set out to reverse many of Mao's policies.
The 1980s were an extraordinary decade. Deng Xiaoping was radically changing the relationship of the party to society. He broke up the people's communes, gave peasants property to farm individually, and suddenly you go to the countryside and saw the most amazing open markets where people were selling things they had raised. That was a huge change.
It seemed like China was really different and opening, and it was changing really fast.
Anne Stevenson Yang worked for decades in China as a financial analyst and entrepreneur.
Ever since Deng Xiaoping told the Politburo that they should change their Mao jackets for sports jackets, every big city built these huge airports, and they had straight avenues straight to these five-star hotels, and these hotels were better than any hotel you'd stay in Europe. And you'd think, what's wrong with China? This is fantastic.
Today, under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping, the attitude toward capitalism is changing, not quickly enough for some members of the new generation who see nothing wrong in mixing Marxism with the market economy.
As one China specialist put it, such astounding things have been happening under Deng that no one who works in the China field is willing to make predictions anymore.
In 1979, Deng visited Washington. Deng's opening was seen as a welcome development in the West and a policy of economic engagement held for the next 4 decades.
Now we share the prospect of a fresh flow of commerce, ideas, and people, which will benefit both our countries.
In China, free trade and foreign investment helped lift millions out of poverty. But many Chinese were not entirely won over, especially students. They were concerned about corruption and wanted democratic reform. In the spring of 1989, pro-democracy demonstrations around the country were gathering momentum. While still a provincial official, Xi Jinping watched carefully.
Xi Jinping tried to gauge the political climate. What's going on? Is the central government supporting this? And being a very cautious bureaucrat, back home, he tried to prevent students from outside to come in and to link up with the local demonstrations.
By early June, the protests boiled over.
At this hour, there are hundreds of thousands of people here in Tiananmen Square.
Some observers see the current wave of unrest as the greatest challenge the Communist Party has had to face.
The momentum on Tiananmen Square was strong. For me, the most amazing experience is just hearing people's voice from everywhere.
Zhou Fengshuo was a student leader during the Tiananmen protests. He was among the first to enter the square.
We want to have a dialogue with the communist government. And I think at that time there was a real chance because the party has positioned itself after the Cultural Revolution in the way of, open and reform. So you feel like there's freedom in the air on Tiananmen Square.
I was on Tiananmen Square at the night of June 4th. We were all standing like clusters talking to each other. And suddenly there was a guy standing there and he fell backwards and we didn't hear anything. So, we're all stunned and everybody thought, oh, it must be rubber bullets. Until we saw that he's not waking up and there's a pool of blood or something from his neck.
Tanks are rolling in down the main thoroughfare towards Tiananmen Square.
As we were kind of retreating, there were, I think, at least a dozen people right around me being shot down.
There's sporadic shooting, automatic weapons opened up, people were diving for cover.
That night, it was the worst of China. The monster reared its head.
At one of the big intersections, an APC just ran over a young girl on a bicycle. It was charging down anything and everything, barricades, people, and the protesters had put up the steel barricades and this APC got stuck. And the crowd started gathering around it, hurling insults and rocks and sticks and everything.
天安门的这个事件给我最大的震惊 shock， 最大的震惊是军队怎么可以对人民开枪？那是我开始疑问这个国家这个党出了什么问题。
The next day, a man stood in defiance, blocking a column of tanks.
It wasn't just a single tank he stopped. There were 18 tanks and armored carriers in this convoy.
The image of the tank man, as he was called, was carried around the world.
At one point, defiant demonstrators set an ambulance on fire and aimed it at the troops. But the vehicle smashed into a traffic island, and that prompted the soldiers to open fire once more on the students.
Just overnight, the optimism that Chinese felt for their own country and for this newly awakened, newly modernizing, newly reforming China came to a very abrupt halt.
David Shambaugh is a professor of U.S. China relations at George Washington University. He served in the State Department and on the National Security Council during the Carter administration.
I lived in China right after Tiananmen in Beijing. That was severe. This was martial law. The city was occupied by military forces. There were roadblocks everywhere. Foreigners were monitored constantly. Chinese were monitored constantly, interrogated. So that was a really repressive period.
In the news this morning, the government crackdown continues in China, where officials say they have arrested student leaders on their most wanted list.
One of those captured, Shou Fengshua, a 22-year-old physics student. He reportedly was turned in by his sister and brother-in-law.
It's been reported that you were turned in by your sister.
That was a government propaganda.
It's not true?
It's not true.
Zhou says it was a party tactic to sow distrust among his family. Zhou Fengshuo was 5th on the party's most wanted list and was thrown in prison for a year.
When I was in prison and later for about 5 more years, the support for students even after the massacre was so strong. Like even the policemen, the prison guards, they would acknowledge that the students were right in their demands.
After the massacre, these photos were smuggled out of China. Evidence of what happened to scores of protesters. To this day, there is no final accounting of how many people were executed. A footnote. After the Tiananmen crackdown, soldiers who had opened fire on the protesters were serenaded by a popular Chinese folk singer, Peng Liyuan. 2 years earlier, Peng had married a junior Communist Party official, Xi Jinping. Xi has never spoken publicly about the Tiananmen events.
He went silent. Yes. Nothing in the public record that I am aware of. That really shows his cautious demeanor as a provincial official. And he always looked to the center for guidance, always trying to gauge what the central government intentions are.
After Tiananmen, China moved on. Under Deng Xiaoping, China's unwritten informal social contract stipulated that if you stay away from politics, we, the party, will make you rich. It's a deal many Chinese accepted without protest.
We shouldn't underestimate the amount of political control inside China. But at the same time, it's also important to recognize that over the past 40 years, the government has done a good job in raising living standards. That takes the
Ian Johnson is a journalist with a long history of reporting on China.
And if you think that tomorrow is going to be a better day, that you've just bought a house, that your kid's going to be able to go to college, that you're going to be able to go abroad to travel, all of these things that have never been possible before for the vast majority of Chinese people, then you'll hold your nose or say, well, the party isn't doing such a bad job on balance, and you'll go with the flow.
By the mid-1990s, China's economy was growing at an historic pace.
Supporting China's entry into the WTO represents the most significant opportunity that we have.
Especially after China's entry into the World Trade Organization, China's economy just got another tremendous boost and more opportunities for individuals. And back then,
Ling Wei, a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, grew up the daughter of loyal Maoist parents. Her maternal grandfather was part of Mao's inner circle. She remembers how under Deng, China became more open to Western culture.
We knew that China's relationship with the United States was getting better.
Colonel Sanders' Kentucky Fried Chicken has just arrived in Beijing.
We were exposed to American pop culture. When I was growing up, one of my favorite shows was this American TV series called Growing Pains. I just loved it, watching how kids could just talk back to their parents.
I was just being friendly. What is it with you people?
I grew up with a lot of admiration for the United States. I really wanted to go there. I was very curious about the U.S. Not just me, a lot of my classmates, a lot of my friends, the entire reform generation, had that kind of mindset toward the United States.
China was most open to Western influence in the coastal provinces, where Deng Xiaoping lured foreign companies to invest, offering them tax incentives, flexible labor contracts, and cheap real estate. One of the fastest growing provinces was Fujian, where, by 2000, Xi Jinping had become a provincial governor. He had earned a reputation for rooting out party corruption.
事后就是这些被处理的这些干部还恨你，对我没意见，因为我觉得他们觉得我确实不是为了自己，我跟他们无冤无仇的，我就是在这讲一个公道嘛。
Beijing took notice, and in 2007, Xi got his big break. A corruption scandal in Shanghai led the old guard of the Communist Party to search for a new Shanghai Party chief. Shanghai was the biggest and wealthiest city in China. Xi was brought in to address the fallout from a party secretary's theft of pension funds.
The move to Shanghai was a huge promotion because the party chief of Shanghai is always inducted in the 25 members of China's apex of power. He was picked because of his long experiences in coastal provinces, which were the most open, most developed.
In Shanghai, Xi distinguished himself by eschewing lavish party perks, such as a private chef, special doctors, luxury cars, and palatial housing. And after just 7 months, he was brought to Beijing, where he was catapulted onto the standing committee of the Politburo. Suddenly, Xi Jinping became one of China's 9 top leaders. He was on his way. At just 54, party leaders saw Xi as pliable and cooperative. They didn't expect a strongman. In one of his first assignments as a committee member, Xi was appointed to head the Central Party School in Beijing, a post once held by Chairman Mao. It's where top party officials are trained, and for Xi, it was an early indicator of the leader he aspired to be.
2008年的7月份，习近平他对中央党校教师下了训令。
Tai Sha taught at the Central Party School at the time.
他们说的话，就中央党校老师的话，应该和党中央的精神保持一致。他威胁中央党校的老师，如果你们想自由发表言论，那么就请你们自己离开这个党校，就是自己想办法，就另外找工作，你知道吧？习近平他的说话就是跟黑帮一样，就当时我就有这种预感。
But few people in the West were paying much attention. And inside China, the country was preparing to celebrate its newfound riches. That year, China was hosting the 2008 Summer Olympics. The person heading up the preparation committee for the Games was Xi Jinping.
中共中央政治局常委、国家副主席习近平今天上午在北京市实地考察奥运会服务保障工作时指出， 北京奥运交通网络和奥运村硬件设施具有国际先进水平。
Xi Jinping actually was named the coordinator for the Olympics. Now, he had very little central government experience, and that was fairly tough because he had to coordinate the Ministry of Public Security, Ministry of Defense.
北京奥运会期间，解放军将动用陆军、海军和空军的部分兵力参加奥运安保工作。
The Olympics, it was a means to test him in his probational period.
To see if he was material for the top job.
Exactly. The Beijing Olympics was China's coming out party, and everything has to be perfect.
多年的期待，7年的筹备，第29届夏季奥林匹克运动会终于在北京。
No expense would be spared. At over $40 billion, the Games were among the most expensive in history.
...2008 was a spectacular Olympic summer game. It was great.
Professor Chen Jianli is a neurologist at Peking University. We interviewed him while he was a visiting scholar at Stanford. You were in the stadium?
Yes. I would say that was a high point. There was a true sense of joy. But it was not a nationalist joy. It went beyond that, honestly. It was, I think, more like what can only be described by Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. It was that good.
Xi Jinping had passed the test. Better yet, he was inheriting a country at its peak.
The Olympics were a major propaganda coup for the Chinese Communist Party to say, look, we've arrived. We're a world power right now. I remember...
Between 1998 and 2005, Matthew Pottinger worked as a reporter in China for Reuters and the Wall Street Journal. He also served on the National Security Council during the first Trump administration. Pottinger sees the 2008 Games as a key moment when the U.S. China relationship shifted.
They coincided with the global financial crisis, the first spark of which was lit in the United States.
Stunning news on Wall Street tonight. At one point, the market fell as if down a well.
The debt crisis and economic chaos could have a dangerous ripple effect.
So those two things juxtaposed together created an incredible sense of jubilation in this idea that China was slingshotting ahead of the United States.
Chinese leaders realized, wow, your system used to be one we were trying to emulate. At least economically. But now, you're no longer our teachers. There's this feeling that we are equal to the United States now.
About that time, China had passed Germany, passed UK, and then passed Japan. And of course, every year, it goes up and up and up to be the second largest economy.
This is an extraordinary period for America's economy. We've seen triple-digit swings in the stock market. Major financial institutions have teetered on the edge of collapse, and some have failed.
The collapse of Lehman Brothers triggered turmoil in markets around the globe.
The economic crisis made it look to people like Xi Jinping that history was moving on, the U.S. was in decline, China was on the rise. They could do just like the great powers had always done. It's our way or the highway. And that was a very important moment that changed the relationship between China and the rest of the world, particularly the United States.
The day had finally arrived. It was time to elect a president, the leader of the world's most populous nation. But there was no discernible tension, no suspense. The election of the Chinese president had been decided months in advance.
By 2012, Xi Jinping had been able to impress upon the party's elite that he was the man to lead China into the future. He was elected General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, and a few months later, he became president.
不但实现好、维护好、发展好最广大人民根本利益。
Xi tried to outwardly cultivate an image as a man of the people. His nickname, Papa Xi.
When he came into office, he portrayed himself as a normal person. He launched a charm fans, he went to a steampunk restaurant, and he said he's not going to have traffic control for his car like for his motorcade.
Initially, this charm offensive worked. Many thought Xi would be a moderate.
The wishful thinking that existed, I think, was something that Westerners delude themselves with about all Chinese leaders. Is this the next Gorbachev?
继续解放思想，坚持改革开放。
Xi Jinping is no reformer, but nobody saw the repressive, dictatorial, control freak, insecure leader that he has become. None of us saw that.
A few months after coming to power, a secret memo surfaced called Document Number 9.
Document Number 9 is an important internal party document in which Xi talks about different forms of subversion that might be taking place in China. It points to civil society groups or NGOs and says these are dangerous subversive elements in China.
It's stipulating a whole list of ideological restrictions, including the so-called universal values, which is a code word for Western constitutional rule and rule of law.
The document is explicit, instructing party members to forswear Western ideals like constitutional democracy, human rights, freedom of the press, and civil society. Party members should stay true to the revolution. Soon after, a 71-year-old journalist, Gao Yu, was arrested and sentenced to 7 years in prison after allegedly leaking the document. Xi was just getting started.
The news 4 top officials removed for taking bribes was announced on state TV.
Xi had famously fought corruption in Shanghai, and now, as top leader, he launched a nationwide anti-corruption campaign.
From top bureaucrats to low-level clerks, China their nickname tigers and flies.
Corruption was a real problem, but the scope and scale of Xi's campaign took many by surprise.
Xi Jinping began to purge, and people at the time, including Chinese officials, said, well, look, this is going to be a 6-month thing. He's got to consolidate power.
More than 80,000 Communist Party members have been investigated so far.
That was 12 years ago. The purges are not only continuing, but they've deepened in many respects. They're now encompassing not only Xi's enemies, but he's actually also purging many of his loyalists.
Xi Jinping has just sacked his foreign minister, just sacked his defense minister. He's sacked a whole lot of other people at the top of the military establishment.
The former security czar has not been seen in public for more than a year.
Those were handpicked people by him, people that he had appointed. The historian Stephen Kotkin said Hitler used to kill his enemies and Stalin killed his friends. Xi is purging both his friends and his enemies. And that is the mode by which he governs.
As Xi tightened his grip, he watched for other threats. Today, in China, there are some 600 million surveillance cameras, 1 for every 2 citizens, able to track people's movements down to the minute.
Every street corner, there's facial recognition, there's digital recognition, there's the social credit system.
The social credit system is what?
So the social credit system is the sort of highest aspiration of the Chinese Communist Party, to have everything every human being does go into a computer system, and with AI and all sorts of other sophisticated programming, you can know exactly where a person is because he'll have bought something with a credit card or a digital payment system. His car will have gone down a highway. Every kilometer, there's a camera taking pictures of your license plate. They will know everything about everybody real time. So this creates a kind of a techno-autocratic system that's unprecedented and with which we've had no experience. It makes George Orwell, look like something from the Stone Age.
There is also a designated Ministry of Public Security, tasked with monitoring the internet.
Xi Jinping came to power and created this agency to control the internet. We're all like, ha ha ha, how can you control the internet? Internet is so messy, so vast.
Good luck.
Yes. And then he did. He controlled the internet.
It's part of the Great Firewall, a combination of legislation and technology used to regulate and block huge swaths of the internet. In China, there is no Google, or YouTube, or Facebook. When a meme comparing Xi to Winnie the Pooh went viral on Chinese social media, Xi Jinping was not amused. Censors banned any such comparisons.
我的文章包括我的名字都不允许出现在中国的。
When Tai Shaw published an op-ed calling for the protection of individual rights, she was purged from the party. She says she was already being monitored 24 hours a day.
他什么都能看到，就像活在一个鱼缸里面吧，盖了个盖子的鱼缸里面，一条小金鱼，一个小昆虫，他看得清清楚楚。但是我的所有声音，我对外面讲的任何一句话我都发不出去，他们看的完全知道我在干什么，我就是这么活着的。
It could be in millions, tens of millions, or hundreds of millions who have negative thoughts about Xi or the system. But it's very hard for them to mobilize, to act together. Any direct, more confrontational, organized political movement will be zapped. The fear is almost like a subliminal air that you breathe in.
There has been significant resistance to Xi's rule among large groups of ethnic minorities. The resistance today is concentrated in Xinjiang, home to 15 million Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other Muslim minorities, many of whom feel like they're not even part of China, which is primarily Han.
Xinjiang becomes one of the great early challenges to Xi's power. Xinjiang, for years before Xi took power in 2012, had been a region where ethnic tensions had flared. The party had tried different forms of control and sometimes very repressive measures, but had often met resistance from different ethnic groups out there, in particular the Uyghur Muslims who live in a belt of oasis towns mainly along southern Xinjiang.
Xinjiang was first taken over by China in the 18th century, but twice it broke away. Beijing has for decades tried to suppress Uyghur resistance to Chinese rule.
新闻头条带您来看到，昨天中午北京天安门撞车事件，却把矛头指向新疆自治区的维吾尔族人。官方数据至少造成5人死亡，38人受伤。
In the months after Xi became president, China was rattled by a series of attacks the government said were carried out by Uyghurs.
1号晚9时20分， 11名统一着装的暴徒蒙面持刀在云南昆明火车站广场售票厅。
They intensified in the spring of 2014, when scores of people were killed at a railway station in southwest China by individuals wielding machetes and long knives. Chinese officials blamed the attack on a group of Uyghur separatists.
2号早上6点已造成29人死亡，130余人受伤。
Several weeks after the incident, President Xi traveled to Xinjiang. As he wrapped up his visit, there was a suicide bombing and another knife attack at a train station in Xinjiang's capital.
有100多名维吾尔人因为爆炸事件开始遭到当局大规模的逮捕。
This was a trigger. She decided that's it. You know, we're not going to coddle these people. We're not going to try to work it out. We're going to control. And I think this bespoke of his toolbox, which he had carried with him ever since he was a teenager, which is, you know, how do you fix things? Control. That's his main tool.
Xi would return to Beijing and enact what the party called a people's war. The idea was to curb separatism and extremism. A chilling directive was sent out to local officials in Xinjiang, instructing them how to separate families and begin arresting Uyghurs en masse. The directive was clear: use the organs of dictatorship and show absolutely no mercy. This drone footage appears to show Uyghurs being rounded up. It's estimated that over 1 million have been detained since 2017.
She says that we must assimilate the Uyghurs and other ethnic groups into the mainstream Han culture. And what that means in his mind is elements of Islam have to be eradicated or severely weakened. Not even more radical ideas that are taking root, but basic practices such as not eating pork, fasting during Ramadan, trying to make a pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia for the Hajj. So very mainstream Muslim practices must be pulled back, is what he's saying. The central government starts to put in place these internment camps across parts of Xinjiang, where large groups of Uyghur Muslims and sometimes Kazakh Muslims are put into these camps, forced to live there, and the point seems to be to really eradicate knowledge that Uyghur culture is built on.
曾经的他们，
如果我不来这里学习的话，我会不开心。
发生怎样的转变？
The Chinese government portrays the camps as a place for self-improvement, promoting peace and stability in Xinjiang.
社会之上人民各民族和谐团结。和政府及时发现了我，就给我一次改过自新的机会，我非常感谢。我是遵纪守法的公民。
在职业技能教育培训中心，学员学习的主要内容是国家通用语言文字。
They want them to not speak Uyghur. They want them to speak Mandarin Chinese. And families are separated. So it's really changing the entire foundation of the Uyghur culture.
Miracle Tursun was detained at the airport as she returned to Xinjiang from her adopted home in Egypt. She was coming back to introduce her newborn triplets to her parents. Miracle says they accused her of being a spy and separated her from her children.
I asked them, where's my baby? They are hungry. They need to change diapers. The Chinese police never answer me. But they ask my family contact information, where's my family, who was writing. Then one man coming from my backside suddenly tipped my mouth. And I cannot speak in. Then they put my hand backside, handcuff, and then put black hole in my head. Then
Miracle was held for several months without her children. When she was reunited, there were only 2.
Then they give me to his dead body like ice cream. Like, you take some ice from the outside, his body ice.
It's cold.
Yeah, cold. Total ice. He says, sorry, he's dead. You can take him now, his body. So, and then I say, wake up, and then I scream. So that time is The doctor say, call police, 2 police coming, say, get out from here, shut your mouth, don't scream, don't say anything, just go out from this place. Then they kick me out from hospital.
Later, she was detained again. Marigold remembers spending time in 3 different camps.
They don't allow me sleep, then they shave my head and they give me electric.
Electric shocks?
Yeah, electric shock. I witnessed 9 people die with me together in the same jail.
Marigold's account has been carried by multiple Western news outlets, and in 2018, she was invited to testify before the U.S. Congress. In 2019, a Chinese government-owned TV outlet accused her of lying.
Mikigu Tursun claims one of her triplets died, a claim that a hospital adamantly denies.
They're saying it's all false. This is not true. You've seen these reports.
Yes, because they want to tell, they always lying. This is in 100% true.
Both Mikigu's brother and mother say
the state TV report included Marigold's brother denouncing her. In fact, many other Uyghur men and women who have reported abuse have had family members testify against them. A Uyghur Human Rights Project investigation says the government is simply media washing. Meanwhile, the so-called re-education camps are still in operation. Chinese officials have maintained that there has been no terrorism in Xinjiang since 2016.
Xinjiang is an issue that needs to be studied very carefully.
Dr. Jia Qingguo is a prominent Chinese academic and political advisor to the government, who often speaks out on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. I interviewed him at a China conference in San Diego.
I mean, we had an attack on 9/11, but all Muslims in the United States were not forced into re-education camps. Would that have made sense in the United States, in your view?
But you fought 2 wars against Iraq and also against Afghanistan. How many people were killed? In Xinjiang, China was launching a large-scale campaign against terrorists. Okay? The Chinese government decided that this is something they have to do.
They were taken from their homes.
Taken from their homes.
Placed in these camps, but all of those people were not terrorists.
And they were not harmed in a physical way.
But families were ripped apart. We talked to one woman whose child was taken from her when he was only a few months old and never was returned.
I don't know. Maybe there are better ways of dealing with this issue. But then in the process, I think some of the human rights are violated. That cannot be avoided.
在职业技能教育培训中心设置了服装加工、建筑装修、美容美发、食品加工等多种技能培训课程。
An estimated 80,000 detainees have been forced to work in factories across China, some supplying American brands. These companies have denied using Uyghur labor, but forced labor for other manufacturers continues.
Xi decided, as he did after the economic crisis, that China did not need to bow to any Western demands. It's none of our business what he does in Xinjiang. He has once again turned to control as the answer for a problem.
Whole world know what Xi Jinping is doing. He is not a very strong, powerful country in this world.
China is a rich country now.
China is a rich country, but is very weak. He just believes he thinks he's rich, his money, or no. Money cannot do everything.
Over the last 40 years, China's economic growth has been eclipsing that of the United States, growing at an average rate 4 times faster. China dominates global supply chains and it holds nearly $1 trillion of U.S. debt.
China is a peer country with the United States today. If we use purchasing power parity, its economy is larger than the U.S. economy. And if anyone believes that they can stop China's steady rise as an economy, it's probably indulging in fantasy.
One thing I have to do is economically take on China, because China has been ripping us off for many years. Somebody had to do it. I am the chosen one. Somebody had to do it, so I'm taking on China.
In fact, Donald Trump's predecessors have employed measures to restrict China trade practices.
They're taking our business, they're taking our jobs, they're making our product.
But in 2016, Trump made China a major campaign issue.
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing. It's the greatest theft in the history of the world.
Days before Trump's inauguration in 2017, Xi wanted to make sure the incoming president knew where he stood on trade. He sent a warning from his podium at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
搞保护主义，如同把自己关入黑屋子，看似躲过了风吹雨打，但也隔绝了阳光和空气。打贸易战的结果，只能是两败俱伤。
Less than 3 months later, Xi would fly to Mar-a-Lago to test the waters.
President Trump's most important foreign meeting yet, greeting the leader of the country he's previously called our enemy.
Behind the scenes, Trump's advisors were advocating bold new measures.
President Trump understood that we had failed to compete with China. And I think because of his business background.
General H.R. McMaster served as President Trump's national security advisor.
One of the lines that President Trump would use with Xi Jinping periodically is he would say, I don't blame you, I blame us. And so I think that that summit communicated to kind of a shocked Xi Jinping that the Trump administration was determined to compete and to no longer pursue this kind of flawed strategy of cooperation and engagement.
I don't blame China, I blame our leadership. They should have never let that happen.
I wrote a lengthy, maybe a 12-page provisional strategy in a sense, but it really started out by saying how many of our assumptions had been wrong.
Matthew Pottinger was one of the architects of Trump's China strategy.
One of the things that I've learned over the years, first as a reporter and later working on national security on China, is that the more comfortable China gets, the more comfortable that the Chinese Communist Party leaders are, the more aggressive and the grander their ambitions. And I actually think that a more confrontational approach, something more reminiscent of key periods of the Cold War, is what we should be looking to right now as examples. You always want the enemy to be worried about what you might do.
The first line item on the agenda was to clamp down on China's effort to steal intellectual property from Western corporations.
CEOs of our most successful and our largest companies would come to me and say, let me tell you how our company is being victimized by Chinese Communist Party economic aggression. And they would lay out the story of, forced transfer of intellectual property.
In other words, you can't do business here unless you give us your secrets.
Exactly. And then also the false promises of access to the Chinese market. As soon as they rip off your intellectual property and pick a state champion to produce those goods at an artificially low price because of the subsidies, they close you out of their domestic market, and then guess what? They dump that hardware and equipment on the international market and drive you out of business internationally.
The Chinese government repeatedly denied stealing intellectual property, and Xi Jinping ordered his diplomats to tap their, quote, fighting spirit, adopting Trump's more aggressive style of communicating.
They were unleashing what they themselves called wolf warrior diplomacy, and it was pretty objectionable, frankly. They were quite...
John Bolton was another national security advisor under President Trump.
But in a way, I think it was beneficial that they did that. They took the mask off. There's no more concealing what their ambitions were.
60,000 factories in our country closed, shuttered, gone. 6 million jobs at least gone.
Trump was exaggerating, but less than a year after welcoming Xi to America, Trump was ready to take off his own mask.
So we've spoken to China, and we're in the midst of a very large negotiation. We'll see where it takes us. But in the meantime, we're sending a Section 301 action. I'll be signing it right here, right now.
He was firing the first shot in a war that had been building and would last for years to come.
This is number one, but this is the first of many.
Trade war worries igniting after the president signed this order to slap tough tariffs on China. Punishment.
He started with a 10% tariff on Chinese aluminum, 30% on solar panels and electric vehicles, 25% on steel, and nearly everything else made in China.
Surprisingly, China's not happy, already threatening retaliation.
美方的行为是典型的贸易霸凌主义，中方必将会做出必要的反制，坚决地维护自身的正当合法权益。
What China did was move its exports to other countries and move its imports from other countries as well. So it shifted the purchase of soybeans, for example, from the U.S. to Brazil. So that wasn't a useful policy.
President Trump has just slapped tariffs on another $200 billion of Chinese exports, igniting the biggest trade war in economic history.
Trump's trade war would consume the remainder of his presidency.
China is now punching back with an equal amount of tariffs on American exports.
After several tit-for-tat tariff increases, the trade war, which continued into the Biden administration, actually increased the trade deficit.
The trade deficit has skyrocketed to $891 billion, the highest ever.
Cost increases also led to a decline in U.S. manufacturing jobs.
Destroyed the industry in the United States.
Intellectual property theft continued, and the costs imposed by tariffs were simply passed along to consumers of imported products. And now, Trump has promised to impose even higher tariffs once he is back in office.
Tariffs were put in place because China's economic policy was hurting U.S. factories and workers.
That's a belief on the part of some people in the U.S., especially by the people of the Trump administration.
The Biden administration has even extended those.
But if you talk in private, many don't agree with such kind of policy. Why? Because it hurts the U.S. economy.
There is the argument
you have the high inflation. Where do you get it? In part because of these tariffs.
Our top story: for the very first time since taking office, all 7 standing committee members have appeared together at a cultural event led by Xi Jinping.
Beyond his crackdowns and trade wars with the U.S., Xi has had greater ambitions for China's place in the world, which he revealed even before he assumed the presidency. It was just after he was made General Secretary of the party back in 2012.
7 party leaders took a tour of the grand exhibition, Road to Revival.
Remember, when Xi Jinping came into office, the first thing he did was he took the Politburo across Tiananmen Square to the National Museum, where there was a show on the humiliations of China's
In the
past.
exhibition, the party leaders reviewed the different historical stages the nation has gone through.
6 leaders had come and gone since Mao Zedong. But at the exhibition, Xi made clear his allegiance was to Mao.
There were pictures of Deng Xiaoping and stuff, all of which he, by and large, ignored.
Susan Shirk served as an Assistant Deputy Secretary of State during the Clinton administration.
It's like he wants to eliminate the Deng legacy, which of course was to institutionalize a system of governance in China that would be more responsive as society modernized.
但是中国人民从不屈服。
In the Great Hallway, he delivered a speech and laid out his vision, now known as the China Dream.
我们也终于掌握了自己的命运。我们现在比历史的任何时期都更加接近中华民族 伟大复兴的梦想一定会实现。
And what he was saying to everybody was his greatest calling was to restore China to a position of international greatness. Now, that didn't just mean trading greatness. It meant a position of political greatness, military greatness, to re-flesh out the old imperial empire that had occupied many peripheral territories, including Tibet, Xinjiang, Manchuria, Mongolia, Taiwan. She wants to restore China to its grandest state. So this actually came to be the roadmap for the China dream.
A key strategy for increasing China's might is expanding Chinese control of the South China Sea. During his presidency, Xi ramped up these efforts.
The South China Sea is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Japan and Korea completely depend on it. So it's no small matter who controls this waterway. And China, in effect, is saying everything from the Straits of Malacca up around Taiwan to the Chinese coast is ours.
These are waters through which 1/3 of the world's maritime trade flows. What China did to actually effect that claim was to commit a lot of ecological destruction, to build up these man-made islands.
The same year that Xi became president, China began building artificial islands on top of 7 coral reefs in the South China Sea. The man-made islands covered almost 5 square miles.
And so they dredge coral reefs to build up islands and then claim that these islands, were just for research purposes, environmental research purposes. And then, of course, landing strips appeared, and then fortifications appeared, and then missile batteries appeared.
南海诸岛自古以来就是中国领土。
Xi had repeatedly pledged he would not militarize the islands he had built.
中国在南沙群岛的有关建设活动，也无意搞军事化。
But after many assurances, surveillance shows there are not only runways for fighter jets, but also deep water harbors able to dock warships.
The Chinese Communist Party has a really long record of just lying to our face, and you can't take anything they say at face value. What they had done is promised a lot and not only delivered nothing, but actually intensified their aggressive actions.
In addition to the Chinese Coast Guard and Navy, large fleets of civilian vessels have been sent by Beijing to patrol the waters of the South China Sea. Frequently, they surround and harass vessels from other countries like the Philippines, ramming them and blasting them with high-velocity water cannons.
The water cannon attack lasted for almost an hour, with the force of the water causing damage to the railing and canopy of the Philippine vessel. The latest incident of Chinese aggression expected to further escalate tensions.
This is happening very far away from China in the waters near the Philippines. There are warnings from Washington saying, we are a treaty ally of the Philippines. We have a mutual defense clause in our treaty. You need to back off from this, but China's completely ignoring that for now.
实现祖国完全统一，是全体中华儿女共同愿望。增强香港同胞的国家意识和爱国精神。
Xi Jinping has also taken aim at Hong Kong.
共享祖国繁荣富强的伟大荣光。
A major port on the South China Sea, one of the busiest in the world, Hong Kong has become the financial capital of Asia.
Hong Kong was the gateway of a lot of businesses entering the Chinese market, and we were that international financial hub, essentially connecting the Chinese market with the Western market. And a lot of that legacy still stays today. And a lot
Anna Kwok grew up in Hong Kong. She was born in 1997, the year that Britain returned Hong Kong back to China.
What was the promise that was made to you?
The promise was high autonomy in Hong Kong, that we would have what is essentially called one country, two systems, meaning that even though we are supposedly part of China, Hong Kong would have its own system, its own governance, its own autonomy, and the people of Hong Kong has their own way of living.
Britain is proud of the rights and freedoms which Hong Kong people enjoy.
In fact, China promised that one country, two systems would remain in place for half a century.
In Xi Jinping's eyes, you can't be an obedient citizen, you can't be an obedient people when you're living under a different system, a different...
Joey Su was also raised in Hong Kong. She came of age during the so-called Umbrella Revolution of 2014.
In the streets, a sea of umbrellas, the symbol of a mass demonstration underway in Hong Kong.
Protesters, mostly students, are demanding full democracy.
Calling for free and fair elections. Demonstrators used umbrellas to shield themselves from pepper spray and surveillance cameras.
On a city fighting to maintain its freedom.
For Joey Su, protesting was part of being a Hong Konger.
I could see, demonstrations, people fighting for different rights and freedoms inside of Hong Kong. So growing up, what it meant by the promise to the people of Hong Kong to me was that freedom of expression, that freedom to assemble, to say whatever you want, to be free to criticize the government or to support the government.
But in 2019, things began to shift. Local Hong Kong officials began to cut back on civil liberties. Senior party officials endorsed the move. It began with legislation allowing authorities in Beijing to extradite Hong Kongers to China. Around 1 million poured out onto the streets, defying President Xi. It was a stunning display of public anger with his presidency.
I think that 2019 really was a nail on the coffin. I think Xi Jinping...
Anna Kwok became a leading underground activist that year, running operations from outside Hong Kong.
Even though Hong Kongers were all out on the streets, millions of them, even though, the entire international community showed support, she was not afraid to say, no, we're not giving you the freedoms and rights you deserve. And he was not afraid, to employ police violence against us. The government is just not worried about optics at all. They don't care.
Now, Xi Jinping was very astute. Some thought that he might march soldiers over the border and take Hong Kong when it had all those demonstrations. He didn't do that. He waited, and then he passed a national security law, and they locked everybody up slowly and quietly.
Xi Jinping's national security law gave China a broad legal framework to deal with protesters. The law criminalized collusion and subversion and secession. Joey Su was on the front line, facing tear gas and risking arrest on a daily basis.
I believe it is almost a consensus among Hong Kongers that eventually the Chinese Communist regime would try to take over Hong Kong and turn Hong Kong into just another mainland city. But I think what surprised, Hong Kongers and the international society was how fast that was being done.
Throughout his presidency, Xi has repeatedly made assurances that he is committed to Hong Kong's autonomy.
In 2020, Beijing subverted the 50-year guarantee it had made to honor Hong Kong's, quote, high degree of autonomy. It completely kneecapped that agreement.
Hong Kong is, I think, an excellent case study in how China lies. They abandoned the one country, two system policy. They began to suppress economic and political freedom. And they're now obliterating the difference between Hong Kong and mainland China. It's one of the great tragedies of our time, really, to see Hong Kong snuffed out like this.
Since the implementation of the national security law, a 17-year-old student now faces between 10 years to life in prison.
Since the 2019 protests, Joey Su is now a dissident operating from America, as is Anna Kwok. In 2023, Hong Kong police held press conferences presenting bounties for the women's arrests.
You have family still in Hong Kong.
Yes.
What has been their fate?
1 month after the bounty was released on me, in last August, they were taken into questioning by the police.
What did they ask?
I have no idea, because I'm not in touch with them.
You're not in touch with your family?
No, and that is for their best interest. Oh my God, I'm gonna cry, yeah.
You can't call your mom?
No.
Or your siblings?
No. And I think that's the toughest strategy the regime has on people. It's about breaking up the trust and breaking up the human connections you have with each other, so that you cannot have that power and that connection you need to keep fighting the fight. Because at the end of the day, it's about fighting for people you love, right? And once that connection is gone, you lose that motivation. So I think that's what the Chinese Communist Party has been doing for decades, actually, to various communities that have been trying to fight for freedom.
On New Year's Eve 2023, President Xi addressed the nation. While he celebrated China's many accomplishments that year, he also made a notable reference to Taiwan.
祖国统一是历史必然，两岸同胞要携手同心，共享民族复兴的伟大荣光。
His remarks on Taiwan were more pointed than in previous years. They came during Taiwan's presidential election season, a recurring reminder to Xi that Taiwan is not in step with China. Today, Taiwan is a vibrant democracy, and its capital, Taipei, is one of the wealthiest cities in Asia. But Xi has been clear that a central goal of his China dream is to reunify Taiwan with mainland China. It's a position that the party has held ever since they seized power in 1949.
Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, now on the last stronghold of nationalist China.
It was in that year that America's ally Chiang Kai-shek fled to the island and set up a separate government. For Beijing, this was unacceptable, and the problem has festered ever since.
The Taiwan issue is a direct result of a now-finished civil war. Very simple. There is only one China, Taiwan being part of China.
The problem today is that the people of Taiwan have made it pretty clear with their elections that they do not want to reunify with mainland China.
The future of Taiwan is not to be decided by the local residents in Taiwan themselves.
Why shouldn't these people have the right to self-determination?
The status of Taiwan eventually will be decided only by the people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait, including the 23 million people in Taiwan, as well as the 1.4 billion people on China's mainland.
Taiwan was on the agenda when Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger made their groundbreaking trip to China in 1972.
History in the making, the first American president to set foot on Chinese soil.
But they were here primarily to explore how China could become an ally against America's archenemy, the Soviet Union.
Kissinger asked me to go along to the meeting. I'd been a good note taker. This relieved him of having to take notes.
A young aide to Kissinger, Winston Lord, was on the trip.
We met for about an hour with Mao.
He found that Mao was willing to engage on Taiwan. But Mao was also wary of Soviet power and seemed more interested in exploring a U.S. alliance. Taiwan got pushed down the list.
During the summit, Mao would outline the basic Chinese position. He said that the Taiwan issue could take 100 years. That's another way of saying Taiwan's important to us, we'll maintain our principle, but we don't have to solve it for a while.
After a week of negotiations, the status of Taiwan remained unresolved. Nixon referred to Taiwan as an irritant. His private handwritten notes reveal Nixon was prepared to yield. "Our policy is one China," he wrote. "Taiwan is part of China. Won't support Taiwan independence." It became known as the One China policy. Nixon conceded that Taiwan was officially part of China. At the same time, Nixon and Kissinger defended Taiwan's right to autonomy. It was a compromise.
On the specific issue of Taiwan, of course we had to make a gesture. And we came up with a One China formulation that's quite elastic and elusive and has served until this day. Both parties, over 7 or 8 or 9 presidents, have used this formula both to maintain through ambiguity our relations with China in a sensitive issue, but meanwhile helping to protect Taiwan's autonomy.
The arrangement has remained relatively stable. In 1979, President Carter attempted to strengthen America's commitment to Taiwan, signing into law the Taiwan Relations Act, which stipulated that the U.S. promised to maintain the capacity to aid Taiwan.
Citizens of Taiwan will still be secure.
But what exactly does that mean? The policy is deliberately, strategically ambiguous. On occasion, there have been incidents between the U.S. and China. Planes collided over the South China Sea in 2001, with both countries blaming each other.
This accident has the potential of undermining our hopes for a fruitful and productive relationship between our two countries.
But the extent of today's saber-rattling over Taiwan is new.
We will continue to make utmost efforts for peaceful reunification, but never promise to renounce the use of force, and we reserve the option to taking all measures necessary. Complete reunification must be realized, and it can, without a doubt, be realized.
I think Taiwan is the next great danger in the world. Even in this era where the United Nations proclaims, self-determination is a high principle. If Scotland wants to leave the UK or Quebec wants to leave Canada, but China has a more old-fashioned view of sovereignty. We claim it, it's ours, get off our ranch, don't get in the way.
China's military drills over Taiwan airspace are a regular reminder of the possibility of a real war. In early 2023, a memo from U.S. Air Force General Mike Minahan to his subordinates circulated online that flatly gave a date for when Xi would invade. "I hope I am wrong," it read. "My gut tells me we will fight in 2025. My gut tells me we will fight China in 2025? You reacted negatively to that. You think?
Yeah, well, so first of all, anybody who says they know the date that Xi Jinping is going to invade Taiwan doesn't know what they're talking about. Because Xi Jinping doesn't know the date.
Right. But Colin Kahl is a former national security advisor to Vice President Biden and former Undersecretary for Policy at the Pentagon. While he disputes the 2025 date, Kahl and other U.S. military analysts, as well as the CIA, are wary of Xi's near-term intentions.
Xi has made some statements about the urgency and
he has. And the date that most analysts point to is 2027. That is the date that Xi Jinping has given his military to have the ability to do it. Now, the ability doesn't mean they'll actually manifest that ability. Like his giving them the homework assignment doesn't mean they'll actually complete it.
But Taiwan's military doesn't want to tempt fate.
We have several scenarios that we have imagined that enemies will take, and we have plans to weaken those invading forces or even take them down.
In July 2023, I traveled here to watch Taiwan's military rehearsing how to repel a possible Chinese invasion.
So this is one of the beaches where you expect the PLA to...
Yes, correct. We expect this place to be high on the list for PLA. As you can see, we're basically right here, and this is where Taipei City is, and that will be bad for us.
So you want Xi Jinping to see what you're doing?
Yes.
好，各位媒体朋友水基线上就是我们的海军的登车大队。
This beach is one of 14 landing sites that the Taiwanese military has identified as potentially vulnerable to a Chinese amphibious and air assault.
The Taiwan Strait is difficult crossing. 20 feet tide, 3-mile mud flat, really only conducive for a crossing 3 or 4 months out of the year.
I spoke to Admiral Sam Paparo, commander of all U.S. forces in the Indo-Pacific, about the feasibility of a successful Chinese takeover.
It is difficult terrain to get to population centers.
It's mountainous.
Mountainous and canalizing terrain, as we call it, meaning very few passes that can be easily closed.
每一个演练啊，都是针对敌情的判断跟敌最可能的行动来做操演。我们想要传达的就是，我们会尽全力来防卫国家。
Is it likely that we're going to go to war over Taiwan?
The likelihood is low, but the consequence is so very high that I owe you every bit of urgency that I can. The effect of some war spiraling out of control would dwarf the Second World War. So we seek to uphold the status quo. We seek to deter conflict. Xi Jinping believes that the unification of Taiwan is existential to the legitimacy of the Chinese Communist Party's rule of China.
They've gotten along for 70 plus years without reunification, so what makes this existential?
I don't know. I hope he grants you an interview and tells you.
Admiral Paparo says that, in his view, Xi Jinping and China see Taiwan as an existential issue, that it must be unified. Why?
You don't have the right to separate the land from your motherland. Okay? Just like in the US, you don't automatically have the right. You need to go through procedures, right? Like Texas, if they want to get independent, you cannot just have a plebiscite in Texas. You need to get other states to approve, okay? This is by the Constitution, okay? Taiwan is part of China. Taiwan has never been separated.
More than ever, a successful Chinese takeover of Taiwan threatens global stability.
If China takes Taiwan, you're talking about an island that is responsible for 70% of all the semiconductors in the world, and 90% of the highest-end chips that power the most advanced technologies that all of us have in our pockets with our iPhones and our laptops.
The world needs this technology. Europe needs it. Japan, we all need it. And nobody else does it the way Taiwan does.
China also depends on Taiwanese chips. A war that destroys Taiwan's chip industry may give Xi pause. so does the war in Ukraine. In 2022, when Putin invaded, President Xi took notice.
Ukraine is marking an anniversary of infamy. 2 years since Vladimir Putin launched his war on
I think Xi is watching Ukraine incredibly closely because the parallels with Taiwan, although not complete, are nonetheless haunting. And Ukraine could be the best deterrent against Xi doing anything in regard to Taiwan.
People thought that that invasion was going to last several weeks, that Russia would have its way, but the Ukrainians have fought valiantly. They continue to fight.
I don't think Xi Jinping is happy about the war in Ukraine. Without question, he took notice of how good U.S. intelligence was on Russia. And he has to wonder, well, gosh, if they know this about Russia, what do they know about me? So if he's counting on surprise vis-a-vis Taiwan or the South China Sea, I think he's got to calculate the odds of him pulling off a strategic surprise are less than they were before because of the quality of U.S. intelligence.
Xi has denied that he is preparing to invade Taiwan anytime soon. But every few years, he orders the military to Tiananmen Square for a display of China's readiness and might.
One of the things that has been very consistent about Xi is his alignment of his identity with the Chinese military. I'm in the crowd across from him.
Ed Wong witnessed several of these spectacles.
It feels very much like this imperial event where the leader of this great nation, this great power, is surrounding himself with people who've come to pay tribute to him and to pay tribute to China as a military power. And he goes out in a car, standing, out of the sunroof as it drives up and down these rows of troops. We see things like intercontinental ballistic missiles on flatbeds, and this is all a signal of China's military strength.
Xi's rapid buildup of China's military capacity has prompted the U.S. to send more weapons to Taiwan. Given the stakes, President Biden has been consistent and straightforward.
To be clear, sir, U.S. forces, U.S. men and women, would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion.
Yes.
President Biden has said unambiguously 4 times, the United States shall defend Taiwan. No American president has ever said that, and no American president has that responsibility. The Taiwan Relations Act says nothing about the United States defending Taiwan. It simply says that should coercive measures be used by mainland China against Taiwan, it will be a matter of, quote, grave concern to the United States.
Now the question is, what will the incoming Trump administration do? You've worked for Donald Trump. If China encroaches further on Taiwan, will Donald Trump, who preaches America first, go to war to defend Taiwan?
I'm not sure. And the fact that I'm not sure may not be a bad thing, because as long as it remains ambiguous, as long as he doesn't, say, hey, I'm not going to do anything on Taiwan. And I think it's also important for us not to make promises that we may not be able to fulfill if Congress doesn't authorize military action.
I don't believe that we should fight unless Taiwan becomes independent. Okay? But Taiwan is not separated from China. Why should China use force? Okay? If it's a domestic issue, then we can do it in a peaceful way.
Taking stock of Xi, his ambitions, his deceptions, his human rights abuses, and his threats against Taiwan, I come to wonder what U.S. policy should be. To date, little has been done to effectively stop China's moves in the South China Sea, or in Hong Kong, or to de-escalate the situation in Taiwan.
I think engagement was right to try. And it was a great tribute to American diplomacy under 9 presidential administrations, with the perhaps somewhat naive hope that China might not turn into a Jeffersonian democracy, but might become less hostile. That was a good diplomatic effort. Did it succeed? Not yet. And engagement has now ended. Now, can we start it up again? I believe that under Xi Jinping, it's probably impossible.
For decades, the growth of China's economy was described as a miracle, fueling the rise of a new and massive middle class. But these are less confident days for most of China.
Despite Xi Jinping's grip on power, his China is not invincible. In recent years, the economy has faltered. Growth has slowed. A housing boom has morphed into a housing glut, with tens of millions of vacant units littering the country. The workforce is also aging. But as China's youth attend job fairs, they face a staggering unemployment rate, estimated to be as high as 25%. Foreign investment is fleeing the country.
The Chinese economy is headed down for much more of a slowdown than we have today.
It's heartbreaking whenever I talk to my friends back in China. You know, the sense of hopelessness is something I never felt before. People were just very worried about the direction the country is going.
I think Xi Jinping has taken the economy for granted for most of the past 10 years. He sort of figured that it didn't matter as much as ideology, as controlling the way people think and clamping down on dissent.
When COVID hit China, Xi's lockdown policy drew huge protests, becoming the largest anti-government demonstrations since Tiananmen Square.
Citizens, millions of them, yearning to escape almost 3 years of intermittent lockdowns.
The lockdown became a kind of lockjaw. And it's no secret if you talk to people in Chinese cities who were locked down, what a nightmare that was.
In the central city of Wuhan, they break down the fence that kept them quarantined.
But it also was a kind of a perfect metaphor for the way a Leninist system does things. Control.
Because the government forbade overt messaging, protesters began holding up blank pieces of paper as symbols of China's strict censorship.
The white paper movement is spreading. First, it was all about opposition to China's strict zero-COVID policy. But in recent days, the message has morphed, touching the rawest of political nerves.
This white paper movement was a very exciting time. I heard these young people shouting, end CCP. And it's the first time that public protest forced CCP into changing its policy.
But many of the protesters paid huge prices, and they were harassed, and they were locked up. Because still for many Chinese, Xi Jinping is a name you cannot say, you cannot speak out. The zero COVID policy woke up many Chinese.
I think the white paper protest suggested exactly the degree to which these forces, dissenting forces, are latent, sort of beneath the surface of things. Having watched China for so many decades, these forces are there and they keep coming up again and again and again. And they actually grow and multiply under repression. But right now, China has affected a kind of a techno-autocracy that makes it more difficult than ever to have these kinds of manifestations because the cost is so high.
Today, Xi is trying to find a way forward that balances control with the need to get China's economy moving again.
Xi Jinping thought that he could have it both ways, clamp down and still have economic growth. The recipe for success, that you had to unshackle society in order for things to move forward, has now been abandoned. If China continues their policies, which I think they will, you're going to have longer-term, slower growth, and that'll lead to more tensions at home. So I think we're in for a rockier time.
Even though Xi feels that engagement with the outside world might be necessary to jumpstart the economy again, I think at the current moment, he has made the other choice. He has chosen to go down the route of consolidating power, the route of nationalism.
So he's taking the darker path.
For now, he's taking the darker path.
For more on this and other Frontline programs, visit our website at pbs.org/frontline. Frontline's China, the U.S., and the Rise of Xi Jinping is available on Amazon Prime Video.